Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and RJ TV. My name is Lecain. We are going to be talking about some of the most interesting things that happened this week. Now, I am here with, as always lately, Mr. Dan Kang. Hello, Dan, and how are we doing today? You're dressed up in a very nice, looks like a motorcycle wear.
Well, the motorcycle season is in full swing here in South Korea. I'm back in South Korea. I'm doing great.
Yes,
I'm going to go riding after this.
We forgot to ask, where in the world is Dan Kang? Dan Kang is in Korea. Actually, we're both out of town today.
Yeah, I'm in a satellite motorcycle shop farmhouse in the back of the U.S. Army base, Camp Humphreys, Pyeongtaek. USFK, U.S. Forces Korea Army base on the backside of Asan in the country.
Wow.
I'm actually literally right next door to a cow field, or the cow farm, with roosters crowing and cows mooing.
Wow. So it's not that far from being in the Philippines. Then I know when I try and do the show with the chickens next door, sometimes, it's kind of fun.
Like I'm in Wisconsin or something, next to the dairy farm. Cows are mooing in the morning.
Wow. Yeah, I know those U.S. bases, they love getting right up there near the cows. So, and we love having those U.S. bases right nearby. I know in the Philippines, they're adding more U.S. bases to make us feel very, very safe. Or not. I'm not sure. I'm still working on the toss-up there. But speaking of trying to be safe and being worried about what's going on, do you know what month this is, Dan Kang?
April.
It's April. It's April. And it's also National Stress Awareness Month, which is a very important month for people like me who are very stressed out. April is recognized as the National Stress Awareness Month to bring attention to the negative impacts of stress. Managing stress is an essential component of a healthy lifestyle. Knowing how to manage stress can improve mental and physical well-being, as well as minimize and exacerbate of health-related issues. So we're supposed to be thinking about our stress this month of April.
This is why I'm thinking about riding my motorcycle, because that's really a lot of stress relief. I must have somehow knew that already.
I don't know. When I had a motorcycle there in the Philippines, I was very stressed. Was very stressed riding that bike, but that was just me.
We call it throttle therapy. We call riding throttle therapy. So it's what we do.
Therapy. Well, try holding that throttle down in Manila traffic. But, one thing that might help your stress there, Dan, although you don't seem to have the same stress as I do. This week was April 20th. And April 20th, April being the fourth month on the 20 day, it would be 420 would be the day. And that is a special holiday for many people around the world, as 420 is the day to celebrate smoking marijuana.
I talked about that in my trip to Las Vegas last month. I hadn't been back in the U.S. in 12 years, and the one thing that really, really stuck to me was the smell of marijuana everywhere. At the bus stop, guys were just lighting up, and it was so odd to me. I don't know. I grew up in my young days. I have to confess, I smoked a lot of weed in my young days.
Well, I'm not going to be confessing that here on the radio, but yes, in the United States, many places are legal now to have marijuana. You can go right down to the local store and just pick yourself up some weed and smoke it there on the side of the on the park bench there if you want. Now, a lot of people have asked me, Dan, and I don't know if you know this as well, why is it called 420? Why is that number so special? And honestly, Dan, I did not know, and I had to look this up, and I found out, and it's a very interesting story. Turns out there was a guy in the Coast Guard that was stationed in San Francisco near a lighthouse back in 1967. And he had the idea in 1967 that he wanted to grow some pot out there behind the lighthouse that he was guarding there. So in 1971, though, he retired, but his secret plants there behind the lighthouse were still growing. And President Nixon at the time had just announced a war on drugs, and the guy got a little worried about his plants growing behind the lighthouse. So he was scared to return there and harvest the plants for worry that he might get caught. So he got his brother-in-law to go there and cut down the plants because his brother-in-law seemed to like to smoke a lot of weed. And it was, 1960s, 1970s where a lot of that was going on. So his brother-in-law and his buddies were known, they had a group name, they were called the Waldos, and they headed there after school. And the thing was, school ended at 3:10, and then they had athletics after school until 4:10. So they planned to meet up at 4:20 and head out for the stash of marijuana. I know the story keeps going. Now, it turns out that before they were going to drive up to the lighthouse to see if they could find it, the guy had given them a map on where to find it. But what they did before they left is they smoked a whole lot of weed in the car. So they were really high. And so they couldn't find where the plants were. But at the time so they wanted to go back again. And so they came up with this name, the 420 group, because that was what time they were meeting at. And that day kind of stuck with them. And then it turns out that one of the guys was friends with a guy from the Grateful Dead. Now, if you remember that rock band, they were known for one thing. I mean, two things.
Sure.
They had good music, and they liked to smoke a lot of pot. And so eventually, they started utilizing this 420 thing. And then somebody eventually got the name later in the 90s, 420.com. And they started promoting that day for pot parties on 420.com. Okay. And then in 1998, I know this story keeps going. This is the original members of the Waldos, that group that got too high to find the plants, came forward. An article in High Times came out, and they dubbed them the fathers of 420. And then, of course, in 2019, the U.S. Congress first attempted to legalize marijuana, and they designated the House in Congress. The resolution was called the House Resolution 420.
Really? Wow. Well, I always actually thought it was because the normal job that you worked during the day was 8 to 4 and 9 to 5. I thought it was 8 to 4 after work, 20 minutes after work would be 420. Because we used to have actually a 505 club where we would meet at the bar to have drinks after 5 minutes after 5. We would go, and when we go into the 505 club today, then we would know we would go to the Rio Grill and have happy hour. Happy hour was 505, and we were the 505 club.
Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story. And as it turns out, this became so, Elon Musk one time went on Twitter and said that Tesla was selling stocks at $420 a share, which made his investors sue him for saying such a thing on Twitter. And Elon Musk he removed the verification check marks on April 20th, which I thought was very fascinating.
Oh, wow.
So, so this week we celebrate the smoking of marijuana. I got to say, Dan, I'm not much of a marijuana smoker.
Losing the designation point.
It's a what?
Losing the designation point. I thought 420 could be like a longitude, latitude kind of geographical location.
It's a couple of high school kids after athletics meeting at 420 to go find some more pot, but getting so high that they couldn't find it, even with a map. But speaking, Dan, of Elon Musk, Elon Musk was a big week for him this week. Elon Musk got permission to test fire off his new rocket. You know, Elon loves the rockets.
Sure.
When you got billions of dollars, you can play around with rockets. So he shot off his multi-million-dollar rocket named Starship that cost $3 billion to build. And he sent it into orbit, or he tried to send it into orbit this week. The Starship is dubbed one of the most powerful. It is the most powerful rocket ever built. It's 120 meters long, tall. It's 33. It has 33 of those Raptor engines on it. We've talked about it here on the show a bunch of times. Anyway, the unmanned rocket, it lifted off this past Thursday, heading for outer space. The audience cheered as the rocket lifted off, and about 4 minutes into the flight, it lost control, started spinning around, and then it blew up.
Well, at least it was a drone, right? It was unmanned.
Yes, it was unmanned. If it was manned, then it would be a much bigger news story, I think. Or if it went out of control and like flew around and went over into killed a bunch of cows or a bunch of chickens. But it seemed the booster and the cruise vessel were unable to separate properly after takeoff, and it exploded. Now, after it exploded, you see the workers for SpaceX cheering, which kind of seemed a little odd. Like, why would they cheer? Because their spaceship just blew up. So I think they were told to cheer, and afterwards they went, "No, it was a success. We meant to blow it up. That's what it was supposed to do." Yeah. Okay.
Well, if they would have blown it up right at 4:20 p.m., it probably would have been a much better result.
Awesome. Right at the exact time. That would have been a story in itself. But according to Elon and according to those people at SpaceX, the purpose really was to gather data and actually get this thing ready for the next mission. And they want to start putting people in it. So there was a little speculation that when it started spinning out of control, they blew it up on purpose. But we're not sure about that yet.
I mean, that would make sense.
That would make sense. But according to SpaceX, this rocket, when it's done, when they've got this thing done, they should be able to fly it 3 times a day at about $1 million a flight. And it should be able to carry, now, who knows, 853 passengers when it's done. So you can fly into space. Now, of course, if you wanted to be one of these passengers and you saw this launch this past week where it blowed up really good, I don't know if that's, but supposedly in the future, they're going to get it a little safer, and that passengers can get on that thing and fly into space.
I can't imagine when we first took flight in commercial airplanes that we had that many fatalities in first flying in the skies.
Yeah,
hopefully we won't have a whole lot going to space.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the thing. I mean, eventually they're going to have commercial flights where people can fly into space. It's going to happen. It's coming soon. Elon Musk has dollar signs in his eyes. And they're going to do this for a while, and eventually one of those rockets is going to blow up and kill somebody, and then they're going to have to ban it for a while, and then they'll, and then I can tell. But Dan, I hope in my lifetime, don't you hope in our lifetime that we can go to outer space? Boy, I would love to do that once. That's on my bucket list.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and beyond that, terraforming another planet.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it to that. I don't know. My stress management is not going to. I think my stress management will kill me. My stress will kill me first. But I would love to go to space. Yeah, if they can get it cheap enough, I want to get one of those seats.
I go to space usually at 4:20.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. I was thinking, you know what, Dan's going to make a joke here about going into space. But getting along to a little more serious notes. You know, Dan, how we talk sometimes on the show about mass shootings. This is something we've talked about a lot on the show, about young white men with their AR-15s in the United States, especially going into a school and shooting everybody up, and that's a big problem. But it seems this week or the last 2 weeks, it's been another problem in the United States now with guns. And this is something called wrong place, wrong time shootings. where somebody just shows up at the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody pulls out a gun and shoots them. And this happened, a big story coming out of Kansas, where a young black teenager went to pick up his younger siblings, and he typed in the address and followed the GPS, and the address was 1100 Northeast 115th Street, and he got there, and there was he rang the doorbell, and there was a glass screen door, and the door opened. He waited there for a little bit. The door opened, and an elderly white man came, opened the door, and pulled out a gun and shot it through the glass screen door, hitting him in the head and in the arm. And the guy fell to the ground. And
that's crazy.
What the guy is saying is that he was afraid for his life. He saw this large black kid, and it turns out the kid was only 5'8", weighed about 170 pounds. But he said he saw this black kid in his doorway, and it scared him so much that he had to pull out his gun and shoot him in the head. And this is all because the GPS was supposed to take him to 1100 Northeast 115th Terrace, not street. It took him to the wrong address. And so that's why he ended up on this guy's porch. Now, I think, a lot of this might have to do with the fact that if that had been, I got to say it, if it had been a white teenager when he opened the door, I think things might have been different. Because here again in the United States, people are still, they have that fear sometimes of black people.
Racial profiling.
That's an issue with the police, profiling somebody. But, I think that a lot of it might have had to do, even when the kid, opened the door, he didn't even have a chance to talk. The guy just pulled out his gun and shot him in the head. And so, and this is not all that happened. In upstate New York this week, a couple of young people were looking for a party, and they turned into the wrong driveway. And as they were leaving, the owner came out and shot at the car and killed a 20-year-old woman. They were shot as they were trying to drive away. Basically, they just turned in the wrong driveway. And then there was another incident in Texas where two cheerleaders were in a parking lot of a grocery store, and they came out of the grocery store, and I've done this before. They went to the wrong car, and they tried to open the wrong car. And I've done that before. Two cars parked next to each other, and they both look alike. And the guy pulled out a gun in the window and shot him. So, this is a big issue now in the United States. This whole, there's a lot of states in the United States there, Dan, that have this thing called the hold your ground law, where if somebody is trying to break into your house, you can shoot them. But this is not that. And a lot of people, this one man especially is saying, well, the hold your ground law. But does that apply here? And I think that's going to be a big issue coming up in the United States now, especially because of, before we're trying to get rid of the AR-15s, the assault rifles, and the young men coming into schools. Now it's like when somebody comes to the door, can you ask first, are you at the right address, or can you just shoot them?
Well, interestingly enough, when you talked about if it was a white kid, it would have been a different story. This is all the byproduct of institutionalized racism, and it's all catching up. And guns, yes, has a big role in playing in these tragedies, but in the broad spectrum of this issue is all of these. The past and history of the United States and the institutionalized racism catching up with society today. We just cannot keep putting these Band-Aids on it. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's definitely not.
Yeah. This has been going on for hundreds of years. I don't, people say, well, we have to get rid of racism. Actually, I think racism is actually getting worse in the United States. It's actually worse now than I think it's ever been.
Racial profiling is almost It's a learned behavior. It's taught through generations, and this is the byproduct of what's happening. I mean, it's definitively it's a breakdown of the social structure.
Yeah, I mean,
and
what do you do after? What do you do after? When this old guy, it's not my fault. The kid came to the wrong door. He was trespassing. Yeah, okay, all right. He came to the wrong. I mean, his GPS. He typed in an address and it went to street and not terrace, and it took him to the wrong place. And what do you charge the guy with now? And supposedly, his grandson came out and said, yeah, my dad's a racist. He doesn't like black people. So now what do we do? How do we deal with this issue now? And this law that they have in the United States where it's legal to shoot somebody that is on your land, who threatens you, who you feel threatened by. And these, these two girls, these two cheerleaders that, tried to get in the wrong car, and the guy, they feel, was he being threatened? I don't know. So it's, like I said, you're right. I think it's going to be a while, because now it's not so much only the guns as much as is how the dividing line between white people and black people still.
But the gun is an issue still, because if you look,
if we didn't have a gun, if nobody had a gun, then we wouldn't be able to. All you can do is yell at him. What are you doing in my driveway?
Yeah, I mean, a sock in the eye is much better than a bullet in the head.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You know what I mean?
Shaking my cane at him. Get out of my yard.
Most of it is not good, but if you go to any other country that doesn't have guns, but it's even that is. Inbred into society, and it's already too late. You can't take the guns away in America because it's already too late for that.
It's too
already
late.
Too late for that. It's never going to happen.
We have too. If I would say, in 50 years, if one of the parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, obviously the Democrats are against guns and the Republicans are for guns, and if that starts to shift enough where you can get to a 25-75 difference, then it's possible. But I mean, when is that going to happen? In 50 years? In 100 years? I don't know.
I mean, like we talk about open carry laws or concealed carry laws, and Philippines has goguns everywhere, but there's no school shootings there.
Yeah, that's a different. Like I said,
everybody tells me. Yeah, and then when I tell them I'm in the Philippines, they go, "Oh, isn't it dangerous there?
Isn't it dangerous there?" No, it's not as dangerous as the United States is.
They go, "Don't they have guns there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I carry one when I'm in the Philippines too." But I don't feel threatened. When I was in America, I will tell you, I when I was walking around in the streets at night in Vegas, I think I felt a little more awareness of danger than I do anywhere else, and I've been all over the world. And it was a little foreign to me because I hadn't been there in so long, and so I've been watching the news. I've been watching the America season 4 episode 3, right? and so like I went there with that mentality, going, "Am I actually safe?" Because I'm not kind of a fearless kind of guy, but I'm walking down in Las Vegas in the streets, and I'm seeing people that and I'm like, "Am I actually safe here? Do I need to be on guard?"
Well, you were in Vegas, which is where the worst shooting, I think the worst mass shooting ever in the history of the U.S. happened right there in the parking lot in Las Vegas, watching a country music concert. So,
and so for me, like when people ask me, like, "Is it dangerous there?" I'm like, "Are you for real?" Like.
I know. People ask me that all the time. You're in the Philippines, isn't it? Are you worried about are you worried about your life or your safety? Not as much as I am in the U.S. sometimes, but
I know.
That's a little disappointing.
All the time.
That's a little crazy, little disappointing. But you know what else is so disappointing to me this week, Dan? And here we're moving on to a different story here, but this is just killing me this week. Is that Dominion Voting was suing Fox News to, and they were going to start the trial probably, next week, and they have decided to settle. And this goes back, in case you don't know, this is the Dominion Voting Systems. Fox for months was saying that the election was rigged, was stolen, and these Dominion voting machines were switching votes from Trump to Biden. This is back in the 2020 election. And it turns out that they were lying, and they were lying on purpose. And we found out that they were lying on purpose. And I couldn't wait for this trial. I wanted this trial. If this trial had happened, Dan, we would have had stuff to talk about for the next 2 months. We would have been able to make jokes about this for the next 2 months, because what they would have had to do was they would have had to put some of those news hosts, those very, very famous news hosts at Fox News, up on the stand, and they would have to say, you know what? We lied about the whole thing. We got caught. We knew we were lying. And now they have settled, but they have settled for some big money. I think it's $787 million.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
That is some money. But you know what I have to say? The lie that Fox was pushing, that the election was stolen, that Trump really won, that made them billions. That made them billions of dollars.
Sure.
And now, because of companies like Fox, the democracy system in the United States is somewhat flawed now, because a lot of people believe that Donald Trump is still the president. They think that this election was rigged and it was stolen, and their president is still this guy, and now we can't trust elections at all unless our guy wins.
Well, I don't know if it's because of that, but that distrust has always been there. But
now it is. I mean, people don't trust voting machines. We talked about this last week, I think. People don't trust, especially in the United States, they don't trust voting machines. I know in the Philippines, there's also some little distrust about voting machines.
The seed has been planted.
It has been planted.
Once the seed is planted, and it's the weed that grows. Yeah.
And they ask us too. They have all these things where they ask Fox viewers that, now that you have found out that this was all a lie, do you still believe that the election was stolen? Yes, I still believe it. Do you still watch Fox News? Yes, I still watch it every week. But they've been caught. Now, Fox is not off the hook because they still have the Smartmatic case coming up. So we might still get some action from that. Smartmatic, another voting system that was used in the election in 2020, is suing Fox for $2.7 billion. So these days, you have to pay money, you have to pay millions to lie, but then the lie may make you billions. So there you go.
That's all that really matters now, right? The slyness of the networks, of all the news networks, is that there's certain content that's actually ethical, with integrity, which they put in there to get the people trusting, and then they blast all the non-truths and the lies. And so there's certain content in all those networks that holds its integrity. Some shows that are doesn't really expound on all of these untruths, and then they just blast you with all these lies, and then they have this foundation of those certain content, stories, and shows that are actually truths. So
I think
it's very confusing. It's very confusing.
I think what makes Fox stand out, what makes Fox News especially stand out, is that they lied they just flat out lied about a bunch of things. They might have been slightly caused to have a riot in Congress on January 6th, but they lied, and they knew they were lying, and they got caught saying that they knew that they were lying. They knew the things that they were saying were not true. And that's something that has really set them apart, because sometimes, it could be this, it could be that. They knew what they were saying was wrong. And they said it anyway because they knew they were going to get more viewers. Because they promote fear and they promote anger, and that's what makes people watch. That's what gets people riled up and gets them to watch every single night is the fear and the anger that you can stoke. And that's what they did. And they were caught because they had voice recordings. People kept the voice recordings and kept the emails of them saying, hey, by the way, we're lying and we don't care.
Well, fear and outrage sells.
It does. That's the big seller.
Exploiting emotions. Exploiting emotions is what really sells. That's exploiting people's emotions through fear and with outrage is, has always been. I mean, in religion, in everything we do.
I know.
That's the driving factor for people actually, doing something, and following and gathering adherents. So.
But I gotta say, but we don't do that here on the World News Jam on DZRJ. No, everything we say is absolute truth here on the World News Jam. But speaking of things that are the truth, there's a big truth that happened this week that is a little bit scary for me to take. The World Meteorological Organization, also known as the WMO, it released its annual report this past week, sort of a health checkup for the world, and it turns out the world is not doing very well. We thought they might be doing a little better, and it turns out they're not. In fact, they're doing worse. They do things like they check planet heating pollution, sea level rising, ocean heating, all those things. And it turns out that in 2022, things are much worse than they ever were before. There's a slew of climate records that were broken in 2022. The oceans around the globe hit a record high temperature. 60% of at least one out of every ocean, there's one marine heat wave. The global sea levels have climbed to the highest on record. Antarctic seas ice has dropped to 1.92 million square kilometers, which is breaking a record now. Turns out the European Alps saw a record glacier melt as Switzerland lost 6% of its glacier volume. Levels of the planet warming, including methane and carbon dioxide, have reached record highs. China had its most extensive, longest drought ever, the European heat wave that had 15,000 deaths. The Pakistan, remember all these things we talked about over the year. The Pakistan had the record-breaking rainfall. In fact, most of Pakistan was underwater for a while. 8 million people displaced and 1,700 dead, 30 billion in damage. The global average temperature of the world climbed 1.15 degrees in 2022. So, Dan, the Earth is sick, and I think it's sick because of us.
Well, the Earth is terraforming into something else, as it always has been. But you have to wonder, during COVID, was that our opportunity really when the world shut down during COVID? And
that was a good opportunity. 2020,
2021, where the world actually, I think, went into record-breaking, clear air, and all the factories shut down, and so I don't. Did that happen? And then when we reopened, we just went crazy and double production and everything.
Yeah,
did that have an effect?
Let's blow methane into the air. Because it seemed to.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just funny that we have all these meetings and all these world leaders coming together and coming up with all these plans and all these things we're going to do, and we sign documents and stuff, and it's getting worse. It's just getting worse, and a lot of it, we can't go back and do.
We were really a collective, even close to a collective, is when COVID happened. When Corona happened, I mean, that was the closest time that we were actually almost a collective.
Yeah, right? We were almost a collective world. We need something bad to happen to all of us.
Absolutely. It's like the aliens came, and the world said, oh.
You beat me to it, Dan. I was about to say, it's like when the aliens show up, and we all have to come together to defeat the aliens. But it's too bad that we cannot all come together to defeat climate change, because according to the WMO, things are getting worse. We have broken so many records in the past year, and it seems like it's true, Dan. Like here on the show, like every week we're talking about a new record. Something, the hottest it's ever been here, the most rainfall that's ever happened. The sea coming in farther than it's ever been before, and that huge crack in the Greenland ice shelf where part of it like fell off. So it's in other words, so we're not going to die from pot smoke, and we're not going to die from. We're going to die from just
the asteroid, not the asteroid.
The asteroid, which we did talk about, what was it, 2 weeks ago, about the asteroid that's coming close to Earth. But oh my goodness, we got to think about some other things. That it's just, I wonder where we're going to be in 10 years if we are really going to come to some kind of resolution.
In my lifetime, over the 50 years, we hear about all, the hole in the ozone layer. We hear about all the pollution, everything else. But I can't remember a time where we actually physically felt those results, and like the heat waves and the 30 days of straight rain. I don't remember experiencing that kind of actual physical experience in the 50 years that I've been alive, as I have now, feeling it now, really seeing and feeling it happening.
I don't remember going, oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Look at that. It rains and there's floods, but I don't remember a country being underwater. Pakistan was almost completely underwater for a while. So,
I know, heat waves to where I feel like I'm passing out. I don't remember those. I mean, in certain areas. You know?
And a lot of this is not, it's not like we were horrible in 2022 and that's why it's so bad. No, we've been horrible for the last 50 years, and that's why it's so bad in 2022. This has been going on for a long time. This doesn't happen overnight. So this has been this has been building up for the last 30, 40 years, and now it's finally come to fruition. And now they say that we are, what is it? I can't remember what they call it, but we're past the point of no return, where we can't, let's say we all come together and we're all great now. Well, it's a little too late with some parts. Some things, it's just nothing you can do about. There's nothing you can do about the Greenland ice shelf. There's nothing you can do about that giant crack that happened in Antarctica this past year. So, the best we can do is trying to come together and see if we can clean up what we've got and then hope for the best in the coming years. Speaking of things of nature that are attacking us, such as climate change, I don't know if you saw the movie, Dan, Cocaine Bear. It was out this year.
I've heard of it.
Yes, it was a big film, big movie this year about some cocaine that fell in the woods, and a bear ate it, and then went crazy and started killing people. It's what they call a horror comedy, but I haven't seen it yet either. But looks great. Saw the trailer, but it turns out this week in Canada, something very similar happened, and I don't know why bears might be doing this, but a bear in Canada broke into a food truck where there were 72 cans of Coke in the back seat, and the bear decided that Coke was good. And the bear drank 69 cans of Coke. So not exactly like the cocaine bear, but similar. And it turns out later that we find out there was some orange soda and some root beer mixed in, but mostly Coke. Anyway, the owner of the truck tried throwing cold water on the bear from the balcony above it, then tried reasoning with the bear, telling the bear that she needed the truck for work, and please do not destroy the truck. Then she tried lying to the bear, and she told the bear that she was a bear hunter. But the bear didn't seem to have much effect on the bear, and the bear caused quite a bit of damage to the truck and eventually left. But it leads to the question, can a bear drink 69 cans of soda? What is the world coming to? How many cans of soda? What kind of stomach does this bear have? But anyway, I wanted to make sure I got that story in. We got to get some animal stories in. We haven't done one in a while.
The Coke bear.
So it was definitely the Coke bear. By the way,
right?
If there is a bear drinking soda, just let it be. I don't think there's not much you can do about a bear drinking your soda. But thinking of other things, there's getting over to sports. There was a big story in sports this week, and I want to talk about it a little bit. One of the things, we talked about, I wanted to go into space. One of the things I always wanted to do, Dan, was run a marathon. And that was just one of the things on my bucket list. But that is, I think, 26 miles.
You haven't yet?
No, I have not run a marathon.
You didn't run a marathon? Wow.
No, I have not run a marathon. I thought, I always wanted to do that before I die. Unfortunately, now, I think if I ran a marathon, I would die.
You would die.
Because, right now I got issues just running up the stairs. But this week there was an issue with an ultra marathoner. Now, an ultra marathoner, they run these races like 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles, which it just seems insane that a human would run that far. But anyway, people in this world are crazy. And so this ultra marathoner from Scotland, she ran this race. But part of the race, she ran it as if, for instance, if I was running a 50-mile race, this is what I would do. She got in a car, and she rode a little bit in the car, and then got out of the car and got back in the race. So anyway, turns out you can't do that. That is against the rules. But she said, she was in the race. She's a professional, she's somebody who's very good at this. And she developed an injury and started limping, and she had very bad jet lag because she had just come from Australia. Anyway, so a friend picked her up and drove her 2.5 miles because she was limping so bad. So at the checkpoint, she told the officials, said, listen, I'm dropping out of this race. And the guy at the official said, oh, you don't want to drop out of the race. You would hate yourself. So she's like, okay. Yeah. So she kept running. And she came in third place. And nobody really noticed that somebody had picked her up and drove her 2 miles. Now, 2 miles out of 50 miles? All right. So she's up on the stand, and she's got her third place trophy and the medal and the money and everything. And then after a while, nobody seemed to notice except, of course, the person who came in fourth, who was like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. So they checked her GPS because they have a GPS when they run these things. And they turned out there was one of the miles during the race where she ran a mile in 1 minute. So they're like, okay.
That's great.
That is a fast mile.
She did the Shazam thing.
And so, and she's like, hey, listen, guys, I told you at the checkpoint that I had been in a car and I was injured. And you gave me the trophy. You handed me the trophy. What am I supposed to do? And and she's set records in the 100-mile and 200-mile runs, which I still think is insane. She said, she says, I was injured. I was jet lagged, and I probably should have come forward and said it immediately when they handed me the trophy. But, they were handing her the trophy.
You guys are giving me money and a trophy. What am I going to do?
So they're talking about, a lifetime ban on her running again. But, it didn't seem like she was trying to cheat. She just like, oh, well, there was my friend and there was the car and I just took a little ride. I mean, it's not like...
all you had to do was say so.
It's just like, they just handed me the trophy. And, this is, I don't know if you remember, Dan, but I remember this story really well back in 1980 in the Boston Marathon when that woman just jumped out on the track like a half a mile from the end of the Boston Marathon. I win. And she crossed the thing and put her hands up and they're like, okay, I guess she won.
I remember that.
And it turns out that she just, ran a little bit, went into the crowd, then all of a sudden came back out again. And it turns out she was the same woman that was in New York City Marathon, which is how she qualified for the Boston Marathon, where supposedly she was in the New York City Marathon, ran off the racetrack, got in a subway, drove the subway up the race, jumped back in the race, So it was not that. By the way, that woman that I'm talking about, the one that ran the Boston Marathon that cheated, who won, and they found out later, because all the leaders were like, hey, we never even saw this woman through the whole race. We never saw her once. And all of a sudden she's the winner. Turns out she was arrested later for embezzlement and cocaine. And she did, she passed away recently, but she maintained that she won the Boston Marathon all the way up. They stripped her of the title because obviously she did not run it. It's the Boston, running marathon. You can't drive in a car. But I feel bad for this poor girl who it just seems like she got caught up in the moment. I don't think they should ban her for life. First thing, how many women do you know that can run in 100-mile, 200-mile races? So I think, I don't know.
Crazy
it
race
seems like she meant to cheat.
Always remind me of the hashers. Do you know what the hashers are? The crazy race stories always remind me of hashers. You know what hashers are?
No.
Hashers is like a worldwide group, and what they do is they set all of these they set these checkpoints. They have all these events where they run and they drink. So they run, they drink alcohol, they run, they drink alcohol, and they all meet at a bar later on and then drink some more. But the whole the whole coming together group events are about actually running almost like a marathon style, and they have like chase the hare, and where one guy dresses up as a rabbit and they chase the rabbit through these. They set these courses like up in the mountains, or in the urban areas with chalk on the sidewalks. They preset the courses, and then they have these stops at bars, or they have these stops where they have beer and alcohol ready.
So these are Dan's friends, by the way. Yeah, these are the people that Dan hangs out with.
Yeah, I was one of my VFW bar was one of the sponsors for the Hash House Harriers.
I figured that they would be. I don't know why I somehow guessed that. I kind of knew that.
They're a great group. They're fabulous. They're great people. And it's really a collective and like a family association worldwide. Every country you go,
worldwide.
They have hashers in every country.
All right.
Hey, you're giving a shout out to the Hash House Harriers in Korea.
On the World News Jam, you learn something new every week, and this week we have learned something new from Dan. Speaking of learning something new that happened this week. Looking at the clock here. One thing I wanted to get to just before, because we've talked about it a lot, and I've had more people talk to me about this one subject than almost any other subject we've been talking about, Dan, in the last couple of months, and that be the abortion issue. And I don't want to get too much into the nuts and bolts of this because it's too, we're in the more funnier side of the show, but we talked about this 3 weeks ago, where they tried to ban this pill in the United States. The appeals court came out and they said, well, no, you can't ban this. And so it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court, they're not so big on the whole abortion thing because they recently decided to say that the states can decide. There's no more national mandate on the woman's right to choose. Now it's up to the states. So, of course, many of the states there were like, okay, we're going to ban this in our state. So this guy from Texas. So anyway,
wash their hands clean of that, huh?
Freaking U.S. Supreme Court. So the U.S. Supreme Court, we thought that they would probably say, okay, you know what, we're going to ban this pill, but they didn't, which surprised a lot of people. So for now, in the United States, if you want to get one of these pills, which is the easiest way, it's the easiest way to have an abortion now in the United States, because it's not like those pills that like they have in the Philippines, these U-47 pills. These pills are actually very safe, and all they do is they stop a protein from coming to the fetus, so the fetus can't develop. But and you can get them mail order, which is part of the thing. One of the reasons why they were trying to stop it is because they wanted to stop people from doing it mail order. So. But as of now in the United States,
it's just going to drive people. It just drives people to go underground to access the pills. So
I know.
I mean,
they,
marijuana should be the big lesson here.
Marijuana. There's a lot of people against marijuana too, like abortion, but there were too many people for marijuana being legal. Almost the same number, I have to say. because in the United States, I think it's 70% believe that abortion should be legal and 30% don't. But those 30% are pretty powerful, and so they are they're able to. So right now in the United States, for now, you can still get this pill, even though they're still. They're gonna appeal it. They're gonna appeal it, and it's gonna go back down to the appeals court. It's gonna spin around in the appeals court again. Then it's gonna go back to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they're gonna have another way of looking at it, whether the FDA had the right to be able to normalize this, and that it should you be able to get it through the mail, and all these these issues about that they're saying that people are abusing it, blah blah blah. So. This story is not over.
That's really the best. I think the only real solution is to responsibly regulate it rather than trying to ban it completely, because it drives people underground to get it anyway, and then it becomes even more dangerous because it's not regulated by professional healthcare providers. So that would be. I would hope that's the logical solution to that. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons that they probably need to do that is we can look at an issue that happened this week on an airplane, which is actually, this is a different story, where a baby was crying on an airplane and it would not stop crying. And it was just crying and crying and crying and crying until one of the passengers went ballistic. I don't know if you heard about this story, but it was all over TikTok man, because they caught it on video. This man screaming about a baby that was screaming on a plane.
What's in the baby?
Can you get this baby off the plane? And they're like, well, we're on a plane, sir. We can't really get rid of the baby off the... But it was, it was so bad. And this is something that I got to say about people on planes now.
That situation,
this guy was just flipping out. He went ballistic, and they had to deplane. They had to pull the plane off the runway, get all the people off the plane, divert the flight, and then the police had to meet the guy off the plane, and he was saying, I just, so I mean this, for a while, especially, during COVID, the people doing crazy stuff on planes and yelling and biting and fighting and everything, it went up. And then it started to go down a little bit, and now this little baby has started it going again. So if we're looking
I've been in this situation a lot. I know you have too, traveling a lot on the airplanes.
Man, have I ever been?
Personally, if I'm traveling, I bring my headphones, whatever. Baby's crying, it's gonna happen. Deal with it. There is no time where a person should not be able to travel freely because their baby cries a lot. It's going to happen. Babies can travel too. Babies are people too, and they're going to cry.
Babies are people, yes, but when they're born, finally when they're born. But previous born, that's a whole nother subject. We're going to have to talk about that later. But when they put me on the plane, they usually always seat me right next to the baby. That's part of they took a look at me. We're going to put him right next to the baby because he's not going to say anything. So I inevitably luck out and get on those planes. But I've been on planes. I've been on overnight flights from the U.S. to the Philippines, where there was a baby that was just screaming bloody murder the entire time.
My last flight, just from Philippines to Korea, was like that. This baby was just going ballistic, top of the lungs, right? But you just got to deal with it. Headphones, music.
It's a baby. It's a baby. That's what babies do. That's
that's exactly that's it.
I remember I was this is doing a commercial for condoms here. So, but I remember on a flight one time, and there was a baby just screaming and screaming and screaming. And everything, the stewardesses and the flight attendants, everyone was coming over trying to calm this baby down, and nothing would do it. And this woman got up and walked over to the lady. She bent down and stood up, and the baby just stopped. The baby just stopped crying. And everybody's like, what the heck did that lady do? Did she have did she put chloroform on its mouth? What did this lady do? And we finally turned around, found the lady, asked the lady, what did you do? And she goes, I took the baby's socks off. I guess sometimes you just know. Sometimes you just know what to do when it comes to a baby.
I guess.
I would have never guessed that. I would have used the chloroform, but anyway. So that's but
baby parachutes.
Very. I don't know. So anyway, anybody that's out there listening, don't do what we're telling you to do if there's a screaming baby on the plane. But for me, Eric Lecain and Dan Kang, for all the incredible subjects that we've covered this week here on the World News Jam on DZRJ, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us this week. And please join us again next week. Me and Dan will be talking about interesting stories that happened during the week. So for me, Eric Lecain and Dan Kang, who is in Korea this week, we'll see y'all next week. Everybody be safe out there, and we will see you